Hello, my name's Sally Randles and I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research at the Business School here at the University of Manchester. And I'm joined today by Lynn Prime. And Lynn, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So I'm Lynn Prime and I'm a freelance communications and corporate social responsibility specialist focusing in healthcare and science sectors. But my background, my career background, was really principally in communications. Probably about 2/3 of my career has been spent in communications roles. After university, I moved into local government PR, and then from there moved across to Manchester Airport Company and worked in a managerial role, again within the communications department for a number of years. Then I moved sectors and started working for AstraZeneca, a global pharmaceutical company, and that was my first CR role. And over the time that I worked for AstraZeneca, I held a number of UK and global CSR roles.
So, Lynn, what do you think are the important characteristics and skills and competencies of the corporate social responsibility manager?
Well, I think that the skills and competencies can vary depending on what kind of business you work for and what kind of role you're doing. And obviously something like an environmentally focused role will demand technical skills and qualifications. But the sort of role that I used to do, which was managing and developing community investment programmes which were underpinned by employee involvement, I think it was much more around softer skills. So I think the first thing really I would say was about strategic thinking and being able to align CR activities to the business focus in order to be able to make the most of the business's resources, skills, talent of employees, etc. And also to be able to understand how the business was changing and to be able to adapt programmes to reflect this change in focus. I think another important skill was around project management. I think you have to be highly organised. I think you have to be good at planning and implementation across varied projects. You need to be able to work with and very often lead different teams, sometimes cross-functional teams within a business or external teams. So that really kind of calls upon the ability to lead and influence and motivate people. A third area is around stakeholder management. To implement successful community investment programmes, you've really got to be able to develop relationships with people, to find the common ground, to build on the common ground, and develop the trust and relationships in order to be able to work together productively to meet your kind of programme goals. Also, the programmes that I managed, as I said, required employee involvement. So part of my role was around planning formal and delivering formal communications to engage employees, you know, the sort of communications tactics, finding what the news hook was, planning the right channels, implementing an integrated campaign to catch employees' attention and translate that attention into the sort of behaviours that were required, whether it was volunteering or fundraising. And then I think finally, you need to be able to understand what range of measures are required and evaluation techniques, because obviously it's important to be able to put those measures in place to understand how your programmes are doing, are they delivering the impacts that you want, and really to feed this kind of a cycle of continuous improvement by constantly measuring and evaluating and making it a virtual circle of improvement.
Lynn, when we think about the kinds of projects and initiatives and activities you do for a large multinational corporation like AstraZeneca, can you give us some examples of practical activities and projects that you did?
One of the key programmes that I worked on when I was employed by AstraZeneca was the Global Young Health Programme. this was a programme that focused on the primary prevention of non-communicable diseases. So diseases like cancer, type 2 diabetes, heart and respiratory disease. And this programme sat very well within the company's business remit of improving health. So the programme started in 2010 and it was running in 18 countries. It was implemented with 2 external partners, an American university which provide a research component to the programme, and also an international children's charity which helped, along with the AstraZeneca markets, to implement some of the on-the-ground programmes. It focused on the risk factors that would lead to that often lead to non-communicable diseases in later life. So things like alcohol abuse, tobacco use, lack of exercise and unhealthy eating, and tried to address those so that those didn't become ingrained behaviours.
That's really interesting, Lynn. And how is it that a large company like AstraZeneca, with all its many functions and the size, the number of employees, how does it translate its values into policies, and how does it actually do that in practice?
Well, I think the corporate responsibility manager is just kind of one part of the jigsaw, but obviously they're the person that's responsible for helping the company find its focus, you know, what is the right area that would fit with the business purpose, and where the business can obviously use its expertise and contact and knowledge to deliver benefits, sustainable and measurable benefits. So I think their role is to help the company find that focus and to put in place the processes and systems which drive that across the business. So, for example, action planning, helping managers, individual functional managers, to set KPIs for their regions, and the whole reporting process. So I think they're very much the kind of the linchpin that holds together the processes and the people that are kind of delivering the corporate responsibility outputs within the business functions. But obviously a key part of that is the endorsement from senior management, having the policies and codes of conduct in place which ensure that employees globally act to the standards that are required of them.
KPIs, that's key performance indicators. Can you give us some examples of KPIs in your area of work?
So, for example, with the Young Health Programme, when I worked on that, we expected our local markets who were implementing local programmes to report twice a year. And some of the standards were, for example, the number of young people reached, the number of frontline healthcare providers who were trained, the number of young people who were trained to pass on the message about adolescent health to other people. Those were the sorts of indicators. So very kind of hard, measurable, output-related indicators. And that helped us to piece together the value that the programme was providing in its entirety.
That's really interesting, Lynn, about how the company works with its CSR role in terms of internal communications and processes that you put in place to manage that, the processes and systems that you put in place. So what about, if you like, inside out, the different kinds of organisations that a company like AstraZeneca would work with, and how you decide which organisations to work with and prioritise your issues? How does that work in practice?
Well, I think large companies have inevitably, I think, usually want to be transparent about their activities. So part of the corporate responsibility process is about reporting your activities to the external world. Very often it tends to be part of the annual report, and the activity was also validated by an independent assurance body that would look at the evidence that has been put forward and test it to understand whether it's right, whether it's robust, whether it, whether the outcomes are delivered against the targets that have been set. So actually there is confidence from an external stakeholder point of view that what the company is saying is actually accurate and can be reported as such. And I think another way in which large companies can demonstrate their determination to improve on community issues in a sustainable way is by subscribing to particular indices and indexes. For example, there's an access to medicine index that I know was important for AstraZeneca, again, that's another way that a company can hold itself up to external scrutiny and can be judged against its peers in terms of whether it's doing what it say it's doing and how good it is in terms of, you know, what the market is delivering.
So finally, thinking about the people watching this interview and watching this MOOC, what advice would you give for anyone thinking of going into the kind of career that you've been in, and what kind of things would they have to do to get into CSR?
Well, I think they need to think about what aspect of CSR they're most interested in, so whether it's the social or the economic or the environmental legs of it. And I think particularly if it was, say, the environmental part that interests them, they would probably need to consider doing an environmentally related degree, because obviously that's going to take more technical skills than something like the area that I worked in, which was more around the social part of CSR, the community investment, because that required more communication skills. But I do think a degree is a good starting point. Working for a large company does give you a good overview of corporate responsibility, of how it's implemented within an organisation and the processes and systems that underpin it. So I think that's a good place to be. Alternatively, you could think about working in an agency, which perhaps provides services, planning, research services to large organisations. If they're thinking about setting up a particular project, for example, they might need some additional support or expertise, so that could be an opening as well. But I know that, for example, in the UK there is a competency framework that's been developed around CSR, and that's been implemented by the Institute of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability, and that's not only to guide new starters within the profession, but also to help people as they track all the way through their career and really ensure that they continue with their professional development to make sure that they stay ahead of new trends and new developments within CSR.
Lynn, that's really helpful and really interesting. Thank you so much for your time today.